Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. And the paradigm I want to share today concerns identity politics and violence. Unfortunately, not too long ago, we saw the shooting of two Minnesota congresspeople by Vance Bolter. One died with the spouse, the other one was wounded with the spouse, and he planned to kill more. This sort of tragedy, unfortunately, is becoming more and more commonplace in many ways. We're seeing more and more engagement of violence. I mean, we had not one, but two assassination attempts on President Trump when he was a candidate. Why are we seeing this violence? Let me postulate that part of it is that the nature of our politics has changed. The nature of our politics has gone away from politics for everyone to identity politics. And in identity politics, what you tend to do is create an oppressor and the oppressed. And for me, this makes it more amenable to engage in violence. Now, I'm not saying you can't have violence when you're trying to push for, say, Marxism or unfettered capitalism or things of this nature. Of course you can. But it just seems to me that you'll become more violent when you're fighting for the oppressed. Think about it this way. Over the past 10 years, does it seem that our political rallies have included more of an element of violence than they used to? And I'm saying both on the left and the right, this appears to be the case. Because they're fighting for the oppressed. And if you're fighting for the oppressed, then violence can be acceptable. Identity politics tends to make things worse. Now, there was a book that came out that described violence in a way in political movements, or this time it was religious movements. And this book was named Terror in the Mind of God. And this is a book that the author argues that the sort of terror that comes, the religious terrorism, is tied to this notion that this is sacred and we cannot lose. Losing is not an option. Now think about it. When losing is not an option, what can you do? You can cheat, right? We can't lose. Meyer, the author of this book, points it out that in this religious space, when certain individuals feel that they cannot lose, then everything becomes a target and terrorism becomes a possibility. I want to be clear. I am not saying that we're at that stage right now with identity politics either on the left or the right. But I don't want to get there. And I fear we are heading there. And what we have is isolated examples of people feeling that losing is not an option. There are too many people who are going to be harmed if our side loses. That is a dangerous place to be. So, when that happens, you can justify taking out congresspeople, shooting at the president, shooting at people who disagree with you, terrorizing people. You can justify having rallies where we burn stuff down, where we block traffic, where we invade governmental buildings. You can justify a lot when losing is not an option. We don't have a politics where we can say, well, if I lose, I come back and fight again, or maybe I can compromise and get part of what I want, because often in identity politics, compromise is seen as sinful, wrong, immoral. What we have here is a politics that does not allow for any of that. We have to ask some really interesting questions, some deep questions, about what sort of politics do we want? Do we want one that may lend itself to violence? Or do we want one where we're trying to work things out together? This becomes another problem of identity politics. It becomes a problem that it leads us to doing whatever we need to in order to win. Whether it's destroying others, whether it's monkeying around the system, whether it's whatever. Our guardrails disappear because we must protect the oppressed, however we define the oppressed. On the left, they're defined as people of color, sexual minorities, women. On the right, they're defined as whites, Christians, men. And I'm not trying to argue that one is more oppressed than the other. If that's what you're looking at from this, you're getting the wrong thing. What I'm arguing is that when you have this mindset that we must defend the press at all costs, you make yourself open to being willing to engage in violence. And this is something, political violence is something that our society cannot continually have and maintain its legitimacy. So, what can we do to step away from the cliff on political violence? And I believe part of it is we have to move away from identity politics and learn how to work with each other. Realize that our side's not going to win every time. It's not the end of the world if our side doesn't win. And realize that some of the ways we talk to ourselves actually placates and permits this sort of violence. Does this share some paradigms? Some paradigms you may have had about identity politics and didn't realize how identity politics can lead to violence. I've talked, when I discuss racial issues, about collaborative conversation, how we can talk better with each other, how we can find solutions together. If this paradigm has been shattered for you, are you willing to think about how can we have better conversations with people I disagree with, rather than planning all of my time on how to defeat them by any means necessary? Are you willing to take those sort of steps? Or are we going to be locked into identity politics and fighting each other? I hope we consider this. Now, you may think that this is all wrong, and you may think that I'm being unfair, and that's fine. Feel free to make a comment. You may like what I'm saying. Please give me a like. You may really like some of what I've been presenting. In that case, then consider subscribing to this channel. The more people subscribe, the more we'll have a group, a community where we're going to have these sort of discussions that it's not locked into the left or the right, but rather is trying to find real solutions that benefit everyone. Hope you have enjoyed this talk, and please come back again. We can shatter some more paradigms.